Welcome to the 129th season of the Canadian Club Toronto, Canada's podium. For over a century, this stage has united visionaries and leaders from politics, business, community, and the arts to share insights on the most pressing issues of our time. And with Canada in a pivotal moment, it's more important than ever that we come together.
We've been having important discussions and debates around this podium in this country for well over a century. I call this a historic podium of record.
Our club's always been a forum for visionaries, public figures, and decision makers to command attention to the issues of our time.
The Canadian Club is one of the most important podiums anywhere in the world that a Canadian can speak to, tell Canadians what it is that they think, develop those thoughts. And so I want to thank you for that very, very much.
Please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists today.
Through our programs and events, including our youth and young leaders programs, our diversity partnerships, our joint events, and our media and social media opportunities, we offer you access to dynamic political, social, and business figures from abroad and right here at home.
The platform from which the eloquence of Canada has flowed all of that time, whether it be business, education, politics, sports, arts and culture. If someone wants to say something to Canadians about this country and about the future of this country, this is the venue you choose.
Welcome back, everyone, and a warm welcome to those joining us online. I'm Shazanne Chu, your host and president of Canadian Club Toronto for our 129th season. Before I start, let's just give one more round of applause to those Toronto Blue Jays. Thank you. Ontario stands at a crossroads. With shifting global tides and domestic challenges, today's conversation focuses on how our province plans to compete and thrive in a rapidly changing world. We are thrilled to be joined by Minister Bethlenfalvy in advance of the fall economic statement. This marks the 10th time since 2019 that we have had the honor of welcoming him to Canada's podium. In 2022, the minister reminded us that Ontario's path forward requires a sensible and responsible plan to navigate global turbulence while preparing for the long term. That message is even more resonant today. Before we begin, let me take a moment to recognize our sponsors for making today's event possible. Thank you to our title sponsor, Agnico Eagle, our presenting sponsor, Canada Life, and at this moment I want to do a special call out to David Simmons, who is a past president. David, where are you? Oh, hi, there you are. Thank you. Our event sponsors, BMO, TD, and CPA Ontario, and our reception sponsors, CIBC and Waste Connections. We appreciate your support. To our season sponsor, Canadian Bankers Association, our official airline sponsor, Air Canada, and Canada's Forest Trust, our nature partner, thank you for your ongoing support. Thanks to Simon Dwyer at Bell Canada for supporting students from York University's Public Policy and Administration program and the University of Toronto's Political Science program. Where are those tables? Oh, over there. Let me remind you to visit our website, canadianclub.org, where you can find more event information and access our on-demand content. If you haven't already done so, please consider becoming a member. We also appreciate it when you post about and engage with our events on social media. It helps us extend this conversation beyond these walls. And now I'm sure you'll have questions for the minister. Please use the question cards on your table and hold them up. Our volunteers will collect them for our moderator. And for those joining us remotely, please hit the Submit a Question button on the right side of your screen. Now, to formally introduce our speaker, please welcome Natasha Vaz, EVP and COO at Agnico Eagle. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Agnico Eagle Mines, it's my pleasure to introduce Ontario's Finance Minister, the Honourable Peter Bethlenfalvy. A true Canadian success story, Agnico Eagle began 68 years ago in Cobalt, Ontario, and has grown to become Canada's largest mining company and the second largest gold producer globally. Agnico Eagle is committed to Ontario. We have two operating mines, Macassa and Detour, and combined, they both provide good-paying, high-quality jobs for over 4,100 employees, and including 300 Indigenous people. We have 13 agreements with our Indigenous nations in Ontario, and we're very, very proud of the positive impact that mining is bringing to these communities. For example, last year, we spent almost $600 million with Indigenous-owned firms, Indigenous-owned suppliers, and made over $43 million in direct payments to Indigenous nations in Ontario. And we actually expect that was last year when gold prices wasn't as high as this year, so we expect that number to increase this year. We also believe in the long-term potential of Ontario, and we are committed to making an investment. So recently we made significant investments in two projects. One is the Upper Beaver project, located in Kirkland Lake, and the second one is the Detour Underground project, located just north of Cochrane. Now, they're both in early advanced stage exploration, but if these projects are approved, there'll be a total of $2 billion in investment in Ontario, and that will create over 1,200 jobs within Ontario. And the Detour Lake project, that underground project that I was talking about, that is an exciting project for us because it has the potential to grow Detour to be a 1 million ounce per year producer in Ontario. This is very rare because this is one in a handful of mines across the globe that can do that, that can have that category. And it'll be right here in Ontario. And the government's focus on energy, on skills training, on regulatory reform has helped enable these investments. So thank you for that. And we believe the continued focus to support the skills trades, to support housing, to support infrastructure in northern communities will definitely help ensure Ontario remains a mining jurisdiction, the top mining jurisdiction in the world for many years to come. So the minister is very well known to many in his audience, and the strong turnout today reflects that and the interest that you have in hearing from him. Originally from Montreal, Minister Bethlenfalvy holds both a bachelor's degree in physiology and an MBA from McGill, as well as a Master's of Arts from the University of Toronto. Prior to entering politics, the minister had a successful career in finance, working as the Chief Investment Officer at CST Consultants, Senior Vice President, Financial Regulations at Manulife Financial, Co-President of DBRS Limited, and President and Chief Operating Officer of TD Securities in New York. Impressive. Minister Bethlenfalvy was first elected in 2018 to represent Pickering-Uxbridge and served as the President of the Treasury Board before becoming Ontario's Finance Minister in 2020. As Finance Minister, he managed through the pandemic, the challenges of affordability, and has balanced the need to maintain fiscal restraint while continuing to invest in the areas that will ensure the long-term growth of the province in the face of economic shocks caused by tariffs and instability. Minister, as you know, that these are challenging times. As you and your government work to diversify export markets, to foster growth, to foster jobs across Ontario, please know that the mining sector stands ready to collaborate with you. The entire mining sector in Ontario stands ready to collaborate with you for the benefit of Ontario and for the benefit of Canada. So, following the minister's remarks today, he will be joined by the Honourable Jason Kenney, former Premier of Alberta and Federal Minister, who will moderate a discussion. So on behalf of Agnico Eagle, Minister, I would like to thank you for your commitment to public service, and I invite you to take the stage. Minister Bethlenfalvy, the Canadian podium is all yours.
All right, it's great to be back. Thank you for those opening comments. Thank you to the Canadian Club, Jessia, and definitely thank all of you for being here again today. You mentioned that I grew up in Montreal, and you mentioned that it's my 10th time at the Canadian Club. So when I think of number 10, I think of Guy Lafleur. But now that I'm in Ontario, I also think of George Armstrong, who was number 10. So I've learned that both the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Montreal Canadiens are two great institutions, and I gotta say it. What an amazing year for the Toronto Blue Jays. And yes, I support the Toronto Blue Jays until the Montreal Expos come back. Then we're going to have a conversation. So thank you, everyone, and thank you for that warm welcome, and thank you to the Canadian Club for bringing together such an outstanding group of leaders across the business and our economic communities. Thank you, Agnico Eagle, for so great remarks, and what a great Canadian champion company. We got to continue to foster these great Canadian companies right here in Ontario. But folks, we meet at a pivotal moment, not just for Ontario, but for Canada as a whole. Around the world, we're seeing shifting trading relationships, U.S. tariffs, and geopolitical uncertainty, which continues to reshape markets, investment decisions, and supply chains. These global headwinds are real. But even in the face of uncertainty and U.S. tariffs, our government will continue to protect jobs, unleash our economy, and make Ontario the most competitive and attractive place in the G7 to invest, create jobs, and do business. And by the way, I couldn't do it without great colleagues, and I've got 80 great colleagues in the House, but 2 of them are here today. I want to say a special thank you to Minister George Peary, right there, and Mr. Lisa Thompson, right somewhere in there. So thank you. Couldn't do it alone. It starts with a plan that combines sound fiscal management with investments that protect Ontarians. Our government has remained steadfast in maintaining a responsible and forward-looking fiscal plan, one that protects Ontario while laying the groundwork for tomorrow. So recently, the government published the province's 2024-25 financial results that tell a story of strong fiscal foundation. A story where Ontario closed the fiscal year with a deficit of $1.1 billion. A debt-to-GDP ratio of 36.2, the lowest in over a decade. We've also seen the cost of servicing Ontario's debt come in $1.3 billion lower than expected. And did you know that the cost of servicing that debt hit a 40-year low last year at 5.5%? And Jason, I'm sure you remember back in Ottawa in the 90s, when it got as high as 33. Someone said 36 cents on the dollar the other day to me. 5.5%, the lowest in 40 years. That frees up room to reinvest in the priorities that drive long-term prosperity, like infrastructure, tax relief, and our world-class skilled workforce. And for the first time in nearly 2 decades, Ontario received 2 credit rating upgrades from S&P and Morningstar DBRS. The DBRS one was particularly good because when I was co-president of DBRS in 2009, it was my team that downgraded Ontario. And then when I became the finance minister, they reminded me that it was my job to get it back up. And we did get it back up 15 years later. And right now, all 4 major rating agencies affirm Ontario's strong AA credit rating. A clear signal that investors and markets have confidence in the province's fiscal and economic direction. Because fiscal responsibility is so key, but it's not the final destination. Folks, it's the foundation. Our goal is to build on that foundation, to deliver a strong economy, to deliver an economy that creates jobs, attracts global investment, and strengthens Ontario's position as a part of Canada's economic engine. That is why we are investing strategically in areas where Ontario has a clear advantage and a lasting advantage. Our nuclear plan, for example, leverages the past 60 years of Canadian excellence in the field of nuclear power generation to deliver a new vision for generations to come. You know, recently I joined the Premier and the Prime Minister to announce an historic joint investment with the federal government of $3 billion to build the first small modular reactors anywhere in the G7, right at the Darlington site, right here in Ontario. That project alone will create 18,000 construction jobs. I'm going to repeat that. Those 4 small modular reactors, 18,000 construction jobs, skilled trades, engineers, scientists, physicists, and another 3,700 jobs to operate and generate those plants, which will be enough energy to power the equivalent of 1.2 million homes. We're also moving full steam ahead with refurbishment of Ontario's fleet of existing nuclear stations. And we're exploring new opportunities for large-scale nuclear energy generation at the Bruce Nuclear Generating Station, as well as at OPG's, Ontario Power Generation's Wesleyville site in Port Hope, which would power an additional 15 million homes. On top of having a globally competitive nuclear advantage, Ontario is blessed with some of the world's most valuable resources, like our vast and untapped reserves of critical minerals. And thank you for highlighting the great job Agnico Eagle is doing in mining right here in Ontario. And our government is already leveraging our $500 million critical minerals processing fund to support the development of a critical mineral supply chain where goods are mined and processed right here in Ontario and shipped worldwide. The days of digging and shipping are over. We are digging and we are processing right here in Canada. Yeah, we got it again from that. The initiation of that applause came from Minister George Peary, who led the charge on the processing mineral fund. So thank you, George. And we are well on our way to build that supply chain, thanks to partnerships like the one we signed last week with Webequie First Nation to speed up all seasons road construction in the Ring of Fire, with work starting next June. So with all these major projects taking place across the province, we need to ensure the right foundations are in place to support the economic growth they bring with them. That means building infrastructure, economically productive assets that connect people and goods and markets with the roads, transit, and highways that make growth possible. With $200 billion already allocated over the next 10 years as part of the most ambitious capital plan in Ontario's history, we are building more, and we are building faster, from housing to highways to hospitals, because a growing province must have a foundation to match its ambitions. To build all that infrastructure and nuclear and critical mineral power, however, we're going to need lots and lots of the best steel the world has to offer. Canadian steel, made right here in Ontario. With tariffs directly aimed at our steel industry, action is needed to protect it and the workers that drive it. That is why we worked with the federal government to support Algoma Steel with a joint $500 million loan to ensure they continue operations and support their workforce of 2,800 in Sault Ste. Marie. Because trade tensions and supply chain disruptions and geopolitical conflict will continue to influence the environment we operate in. But folks, Ontario's resilience gives us confidence, and it gives me hope. We here in Canada have more than enough firepower to take matters into our own hands and grow our economy independently of U.S. tariff pressures. We can continue to support businesses right here at home by promoting Buy Ontario, including a directive that our own government agencies procure from Canadian companies. We're speeding up construction of projects that give us critical advantages by speeding up and streamlining approvals and environmental assessments through a one process, one review system. And just last week, we announced Frontier Lithium's world-class PA Key lithium project near Red Lake, the first to move forward under this framework. And we're building new supply chains, growing our businesses, and creating new markets by opening up free trade between the provinces and territories. because Canada's best trading partner is Canada. So you can see we've taken numerous actions at home, together with our strong fundamentals, our diverse economy, and our fiscal plan, to ensure that we are well positioned to navigate a new economy, to turn global challenges into opportunities for growth. We're planning for long-term prosperity. You know, Sir Wilfrid Laurier called the 20th century Canada's century. I think it's time we called the 21st century Canada's century. To all the business leaders and workers in this room, let's work together. Your leadership, your investments, your hard work drive Ontario's success. We value that partnership deeply because no government builds prosperity alone. We do it together with a shared commitment to building a more resilient and self-reliant Ontario. And I will be presenting and releasing the fall 2025 economic statement on Thursday, November 6th. And with this update, our mission is clear: to strengthen our economy, to drive a vision, and mostly to protect Ontario, protect families, workers, businesses, and our future. And we know challenges will come, but we also know Ontarians and Canadians are up to the challenge. Now more than ever, we need to unleash our economy and make Ontario the most competitive place in the G7 to invest, create jobs, and do business. Thank you, and I look forward to the questions from Jason Kenney. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm slightly to the right of Jason Kenney, just saying.
All right. No fastballs like Yamamoto. Don't worry about it, Peter.
Oh, please no.
Well, I love your optimism because we're going through some challenging and uncertain times. Maybe I could pick up with where you started, which is the headwinds that we're facing because of the tariffs. You're about to read your budget this week, later this week, after the federal budget. How do you plan a fiscal plan for the medium term when your biggest industries are getting clobbered by these tariffs, and there's so much uncertain and unresolved? What kind of room for a potential downturn are you building into your budget? What are you looking at in terms of your scenarios?
Sure, it's a great question. You know, we follow the private sector forecasts, so they're all around 0.8, 0.9% of real GDP growth for 2025, slightly higher for 26, 27. So just up over 1%, around 1%. So it's growth, but it's not great growth. I think this is an opportunity, as I said in my remarks, to say, look, we've had it pretty good with the U.S. We've had free trade, $30 trillion market right at our doorsteps. Countries around the world would give their left arm for that. And we had a defense policy that was typically a phone line, a Rogers Bell phone line to the White House. No more. We've got to be maîtres chez nous, as they say in Quebec. We have to be masters in our own house. Open up new markets. Invest in things that we can invest in today. I mentioned nuclear. I go around the world, and the world is going nuclear. There's no question. Let me rephrase that. Didn't come out right. There is no path to net zero without nuclear energy. Clean, green. Yeah, that was Bruce Power, I think, that started that applause. And you know, I've been in Switzerland and Sweden recently, and of course France and England. They all have nuclear generation stations. But what they don't have right now is broad public support for investing and refurbishing and starting the investment. But they will catch up. Mm-hmm. There's no question that people will want that. So we have an opportunity. We have a first mover advantage here. We have the technology. We have the skills. We've been refurbishing plants. Of the 16 that we have, we're refurbishing them now. We're working on small modular reactors, and we're looking at large scale. We have the physicists, the engineers, skilled trades. But I love the comment. We got to continue to focus on supporting those jobs, because this nuclear industry is going to be tremendous for Ontario and tremendous for Canada. But let's not fritter that away. I've said to the Premier and the Prime Minister, I'd love it if they locked arms on the shores of Lake Ontario and said, a message to the world, we're building large-scale nuclear, and so come to Canada, race for talent, bring it all here, and I think that's going to be a competitive advantage that John Robarts 60 years ago started. This is not easy work, but built 20 nuclear stations that power 60% of our province. I'm thinking about the next 60 years. I think we've got it all here.
So, Peter, I'm with you totally on nuclear, even though I am former premier of the province with the third largest oil and gas reserves in the world. I and most Albertans, I can tell you, are certainly with you on nuclear, and we hope that someday some of the SMR technology you're developing here can be applied to the oil sands for net zero production of that energy. But you talked a lot now, and the premier has, about protecting Ontarians, understandably, from the consequences of the U.S. tariffs. You talked about the $500 million for Algoma Steel and other quotes investments. That's on top of a few years where your government and the federal government rolled out between you tens of billions of dollars of public money for particular projects, EVs, batteries, and so on. Are there not fiscal, I'm a little concerned about the fiscal implications of a policy designed around protection rather than growth. Do you share that concern? There's a fiscal limit to what can be done if this tariff situation becomes sustained and really bad.
I think it's a great point. You know, it's not either or. It's protect and grow. And I'll give, first of all, on the fiscal side, I'll just highlight, I wish I had brought my slides, because you got some big slides, projectors up here. I show a graph whereby our total debt has increased by $100 billion since we came into power. 75% of that is for infrastructure, for long-term assets. We've actually virtually balanced our budget the last 4 years. We've actually reduced our debt to GDP, which is a measure of fiscal health, to the lowest level in over a decade. We've, as I said, our interest costs, which is a metric the rating agencies look at, is the lowest it's been in 40 years. And so don't listen to me, listen to those credit rating agencies that affirmed our rating and upgraded our rating. So you start with a strong fiscal foundation. I think the second piece, though, is protect. I mean, I am not going to let the steel industry, at this point, when we have a 50% tariff, we have to ask to fail. We have to ask ourselves, do we want a steel industry in Canada? Do we want the potential to build pipelines with Canadian steel, to build military vehicles with Canadian steel, to build transportation and infrastructure with Canadian steel? And I would submit that the answer to all those questions is a resounding yes. So that's the protect part of it in a challenging environment. But then I think we need to grow. We need to grow our energy footprint, as I mentioned, which includes, by the way, pipelines, and maybe we'll get to that, and unleash our conventional energy in this country. But we need to support critical minerals, because we can be a powerhouse in critical minerals here in Canada, and particularly in Ontario. We need to think about AI, technology, defense manufacturing, think about advanced manufacturing and life sciences. These are core things that I think we have the opportunity to turbocharge right now. And it's really good, I'll end on this point. Jason, you can relate to this when you don't have a federal government rowing in the same direction as you, which were some of the challenges you had when you were premier. We didn't build any pipelines. We built a little bit, but not enough. We didn't build LNG. We didn't build new infrastructure. We stood by while the world moved forward. Now I think we've got a shot between the federal government, who wants to do nation building, move fast, work together. I think we've got a real shot.
I hope you're right, and I can say Western Canadians are very happy to have an Ontario government that's supporting responsible resource development. On the growth agenda, we have seen, as you know, 30 years of declining productivity and competitiveness, several years of declining per capita GDP, and significant outflows of capital. Can we really get serious about energizing economic growth in this country without getting our tax rates down to incentivize work, saving, and investment? I mean, here in Ontario, you've got a highest marginal personal income tax rate, if I'm not mistaken, of 53.5%.
Close, 53.53.
Even higher. and a corporate tax rate of, 26.5%. I'm old enough to remember when there was a cross-partisan consensus to get the corporate tax rates averaged to 25, and that's when the U.S. had a 36-point corporate tax rate. They brought it down to, 22 points now. 5 years ago, renewed under the Big Beautiful Bill. So we have outflows of capital, diminishing productivity. When are you going to bring some of your fiscal firepower to energizing growth through tax relief?
Well, I think it's a great point. And by the way, we already have. But clearly, you keep going. But let's look at the you already have. When the federal government was increasing the carbon taxes every year, we dropped the gas tax, and we made it permanent. When they were looking at doing capital gains tax increases, we reduced small business taxes, we reduced the business education property tax, we reduced taxes on alcohol, beer, wine, cider, spirits, a range of taxes. We reduced fees on a number of things. Some, in my last budget, some $13 billion for consumers, just consumers, in terms of tax cuts and fee cuts, and another almost $12 billion for businesses through a range of measures. But you got to keep going. We're not an island here in Ontario. My number one ask of the federal government for their budget tomorrow is cut taxes. Cut taxes, because that's the right way to go. We've been doing it. Join Ontario and keep it going, because it will become more productive.
On this, I heard the Premier at a different club a couple of weeks ago say that
I was there.
Ontario couldn't move forward with tax cuts unless or until Ottawa did. Why not? I cut corporate taxes as Premier by a third. Ralph Klein brought in a 10% flat tax in Alberta without coordinating that with the feds. Why can't you lead?
Well, we have. What he's talking about is on the HST, the integrated tax. So, for example, we just cut the HST for first-time home buyers of new builds. That's going to put $130,000 potentially in the pockets of anyone who wants to buy a new condo or a new home. But we can't do it alone because we have an integrated tax system. We outsourced our tax to Ottawa on the HST.
On the HST, okay.
Yeah. And we've cut the small business tax on our own. We've cut the business education property tax on our own. We cut the gas tax on our own. But some of the things we have to do together. Another area that we cut is the HST on purpose-built rental. In fact, I put it in my budget in 2023 and said, if you do that, because we're integrated, you have to do that, you have to pass legislation, blah, 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 I'm prepared to cut the 8%. You only have to cut 5%. And they waited a year, but then they announced it. And it's generated more building of purpose-built. So yes, there's more to do. I hear you. But I tell you, Ontario's done a lot of heavy lifting. It's time the federal government, and I think they're signaling that they're going to do that. The capital cost allowance would be another to accelerate that. I think that would be a really well-received measure. We'll see if it comes in. And then we'll see if they pass the budget. Because if we can't move until the budget's passed into legislation.
Speaking of taxes, you well know that I was the co-founder of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation.
And you're wearing a Fraser Institute tie.
I am wearing a Fraser Institute tie as well. So I'm obliged to ask you to respond to their criticism that your government has been maintaining levels, they claim, of per capita program spending, real adjusted, roughly equivalent to the Wynne government, and that you have not demonstrated the kind of fiscal discipline that, coming out of COVID, that they would like to see. So how would you respond to critics on your fiscal rights, so to speak?
Well, you're the perfect guy, because you can go back and tell them the message I'm about to give you to both the Fraser Institute and the Taxpayer Federation. They're dead wrong. Kathleen Wynne never had population grow by 2 million people over the last couple of years. A massive influx, again, federally administered, but you got to have the infrastructure in place. So tremendous pressure on our social infrastructure and expenditures. But secondly, we inherited an infrastructure deficit. Now, you've probably heard that before, but if you're not building roads, if you're not building highways, if you're not building hospitals, if you're not building schools, if you're not building subways, and if you're not building long-term care, it accumulates. And so we now have the largest capital budget in the history of the province, in part to catch up and in part to accommodate the growth in the population. But let me give you an example to bring it home. In my riding of Pickering and in neighboring Ajax, in the 7 years before we were elected They built 0 long-term care beds. Now think of that. Our population is aging, and you're not keeping up with that trend.
And COVID demonstrated why.
And COVID just laid the lack of vision for that in devastating ways. They built, in that same 7-year period, 611 net new beds across the whole province. Well, we built 320 beds at Ajax Pickering Lake Ridge Gardens, 320 brand new beds, and we're building another 300 in North Pickering. So 620 since 2020, and there's more. So we built more in a couple of years in Pickering than the previous government built in 7 years. You got to build. That's what you do as government. That's what we do for a just society, to take care of our most vulnerable. And that's why we're going to continue to borrow money for infrastructure and keep an operating and path to balance in our books.
So speaking of path to balance, your government in the past has committed to a balanced budget by 27-28. Are you still sticking to that goal?
Yes.
I agree. That's good news. And some cynics out there say that in your budgets you have a tendency to project these higher deficits than actually are realized. I've been around a lot of cabinet tables, and I'm not suggesting that's true, but I do know that when the finance minister is able to say no to spending demands around the table, it's helpful. How do you manage those spending demands? Because I know they're constant and they're incessant from the opposition, from interest groups, and even from your colleagues. How do you manage all of that?
Very carefully. You know, and sometimes, you know, you can't hit the mark on your targets. You remember Harold Macmillan? Mm-hmm. Events, dear boy, events.
Events.
Something like COVID, something like tariffs. You know, you think you have a plan, just when you think you're there, they suck you right back in.
Yeah.
That's from The Godfather 3, by the way. That's how I feel sometimes. So, but don't underestimate our drive to provide a balanced fiscal plan for Ontarians, because it allows you then to do all these other things responsibly. It also allows you to deal with things. You know, you have to look around corners, and sometimes you get it right, and sometimes you didn't see something coming. So that's why I'm such a fiscally focused finance minister, Jason. I really believe that, you know, while people have been desensitized to debts and deficits, I think they still really matter. And we have an obligation not just to think about, as Brian Mulroney said, the next 10 days, but think about the next 10 years. And so that's hopefully what we'll continue to, well, I know we will continue to do, and hopefully we can deliver for the people of Ontario and for the people of Canada. Of
course, the best fiscal policy is a growing economy. So coming back to the growth agenda, you talked a lot here, as the Premier has this year, about finally making tangible progress on the promise of the Ring of Fire. Very encouraging deal with one of the First Nations that Greg Rickford signed this week. But people have been talking about this for 15 years, and yet every year when PDAC comes to Toronto, we're still hearing from international mining companies it takes 16 years to get a permit in Canada, in Ontario. We haven't moved a shovel in the Ring of Fire. What's been holding that up, and what's different now?
Okay, and let me just say, you talked about the economy. You know, I mentioned the $100 billion of debt that we've accumulated primarily for infrastructure. In that same period, our economy has grown from $850 billion to $1.2 trillion. So think about that again. $350 billion in growth in the economy and debt to finance infrastructure, which I think is the smart play. Because those assets, Jason, are going to be around long after you and I are, you know where, at the bar. No, after we're gone. So I think it's smart debt. Now, in terms of the Ring of Fire and talking about it, you know, you have to have a willing partner in Ottawa. There's something called C-69. Yeah. Bill C-69, the impact assessment. I can give you story after story after story how that slowed down building the critical infrastructure to unleash.
And by the way, I challenged that in court. You guys supported us, went all the way to the Supreme Court. 9 of 10 provinces challenged it. The Supreme Court of Canada struck it down, but it's still in place.
It boggles the mind. And we can unleash our economy when we're working in different ways. If the provincial government's rowing one way and the federal's rowing the other way, I think what happens is that the boat goes around in circles. So it's hard to, we've got to build things faster. We've got to get things done in partnership with First Nations. So you mentioned Greg Rickford. I think we've just announced that we're going to do a study to build a pipeline coming east. We've got Alberta and Saskatchewan joining us. I have a lot of sympathy for Albertans. You know, if we had built an LNG, for 10 years we didn't build anything. The U.S. didn't have much. The U.S. now is a leader in LNG exports. We've got it all. And then Germany comes to us on bended knee and says, please give me all the LNG. And we go, there's no business case. You've got to be kidding me.
By the way, do you know the price of Western Canadian gas right now, what we call the AECO price, is about 50 cents. Some producers are paying midstreamers to take it off their hands. Meanwhile, LNG price on the Asian market, spot market, is like $16 and it's 25 in Europe. That's the value that we're losing for our economy.
Well, if I think of all the conventional, look, it's not either or. You know, India is on coal for most of its electricity. China, Germany's still on coal, and they've had to do more coal because of having gas cut off from Russia. The U.S. is still 16% coal. We have the most ethically, responsibly, reliably mined conventional oil and gas that the market wants as we transition. And Alberta's doing their part. They're leading in renewables. They're looking at carbon capture and storage, like in Cold Lake, which is on the list of the first 5 nation-building projects out of Ottawa. You know, I think we got to stand shoulder to shoulder with Ottawa now, with Alberta, I should say. They're great jobs. It's what the world wants. It'll generate the cash flows. And by the way, if you had been successful working with Ottawa to get all that built, that would have added 3% to our GDP.
Easily. We took a 1.5% increase in GDP just with the additional 500,000 barrels a day moved by TMX, by Trans Mountain expansion. So you're absolutely right. Speaking of Ottawa, tomorrow's Ottawa Budget Day. What are you looking for as concrete proof points that Ottawa is going to start rowing in the direction of a growth agenda?
Well, I'd love to see, as you highlighted, lower taxes, because for too long out of Ottawa, we saw taxes go up. We're starting to see that ship turn. It wasn't that long ago that they wanted to increase capital gains tax. You know, we haven't raised a tax. We've cut taxes and fees. I highlighted some of the ones that we did. But we have to be competitive, and you can do both. You can be fiscally responsible and generate tax cuts. As I said, grow your economy by $350 billion to $1.2 trillion. You can do, it's not either or, you can do and. I'd love to see that. And I'd love to see some follow through on some of the commitments on the nation building, because we mentioned Bill C-69. There's also the emissions cap. There's the deep water ban, or the deep port ban.
The C-49 tanker ban.
Tanker ban. This is our opportunity to, over the next decade or two, drive incredible economic prosperity. So I'd like to see some follow through there. And ultimately, we need to get a trade deal. That's not an indelicate thing to do. It's not an easy thing to do. In the meantime, though, keep supporting Canadian free trade. Do your part, and do your part on buying Canadian. You know, we have to reorient to provide contracts to our domestic producers, be it defense, be it to shipbuilding, be it pipelines. You know, reorient that to that, and lock arms to build what I believe will be the most competitive and prosperous economy in the G7.
Well, Minister, you got a big week ahead. I want to say I'm grateful as a Canadian that we have such a person of such depth and expertise in managing the finances of Canada's largest province. I wish you well this week. And speaking of growth, I think we have to get this very talented crowd back to work. So we'll hand it back to Cheeson, and thank you very much, Minister, and good luck this week.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you. And by the way, this is my 10th time doing this. I've had some great people. Thank you, Jason, and thank you for all your...
I'm told this is my 5th time on this stage.
5th time, so you got 5 more to catch up with me. But just so you guys know, he doesn't, I don't know what questions he's going to ask. I've never had, I might give him an idea or two, but he didn't, you know, he's free to go wherever he wants. So thank you very much to Jason Kenney.
Thank you.
Minister Bethlenfalvy, thank you for sharing Ontario's economic vision. We are grateful for your insights and leadership, and we look forward to your 11th time at our podium. Jason, thank you for moderating today's discussion. It was so thoughtful and engaging, and this is your 6th time at our podium. Appreciate it. To our sponsors, thank you once again, Agnico Eagle, Canada Life, BMO, TD, CPA Ontario, CIBC, and Waste Connections. And thank you to our AV production partner, VVC Live. Before we go, I invite you to join us at a few of our upcoming events. On November 10th, we welcome Her Worship, Olivia Chow, Mayor of Toronto. Thank you. We host the Honourable Francois-Philippe Champagne on November 13th. And on November 19th, we convene a conversation on Canada's infrastructure imperative, very timely, with voices from TC Energy, Ellis Don, and more. Please visit canadianclub.org for more information. Thank you all for joining us today, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you so much.